Okay. It's 6 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And we will begin with our land acknowledgement statement. The Chinookan peoples, known as the Clackamas and Cascades, are the indigenous people of the land now inhabited by the city of Wood Village and other areas of the Columbia River. The village of Nechakli was located near today's Blue Lake Park. Ancestral life of these peoples included a seasonal round of resource gathering and stewardship from the Wapato fields and the fishing areas of the Columbia River to the cedar and huckleberry gathering areas of the High Cascades. Introduced disease from early settlers dramatically reduced the number of these people. They signed the Willamette Valley Treaty of 1855 with the United States government and were forcibly removed to the Grand Ronde Indian Reservation. We thank the descendants of these tribes for being the original stewards and protectors of these lands since time immemorial. We also acknowledge the systemic policies of genocide, relocation, and assimilation that still impact many indigenous Native American families today. We are honored by the collective work of many Native nations, leaders, and families who are demonstrating resilience, resistance, revitalization, healing, and creativity, and we are honored to be guests upon these lands. Now we'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
One. I'll go to agenda item number 1, which is to open the floor for citizen comment on non-agenda items. Greg, was any comments?
There are no comments submitted electronically, written, or requests to be phoned in, and everyone here they're on the agenda.
Right, they're on the agenda. All right, we'll close the floor then, and we'll have the public safety report with Chief Hackler.
Evening, Mayor and councilors. Appreciate you guys having us tonight. I brought a special guest speaker. He'll have an opportunity to talk here just a little bit. Deputy Juan Hidalgo. He's one half of the dynamic duo of the Hope team. So if there's any houseless questions or anything like that, he hear from the horse's mouth. Okay, so the January law enforcement report, going through, looking at the stats coming down, you'll look at extra targeted patrol. For this month, we had 15. Last month, we had 3. Then right below it is premise checks. We had 6 this month, but 24 last month. They're kind of similar in type of call load and type of call it is. So, but if you put them together, they're actually quite similar, 21 and 27. So it could depend on how the deputies code what they're doing, whether they're doing a premise check or they're doing an extra targeted patrol. Extra targeted patrol can be a premise check. So not too concerned about those differences. Traffic accidents were up 16 over 11. One of those accidents was actually falsely reported. So that's technically, I guess it could be 15 over 11. And we can talk a little bit more about that as we get down a little bit lower through some of our data. Traffic stops. I know that this has been a subject on people's minds over the last few months. This month we had 72. And the previous month was 50. Even though it is an increase, as you guys are aware, we did do a pedestrian crosswalk mission up there off of Riverwood and Wood Village Boulevard. During that time, we conducted 21 traffic stops in 1 hour. That was all that we had the capacity to do, and we could have done more. So with those 21 traffic stops, as well as some that Mr. Dirks and I did during a ride along, we're actually down below that 50. So that's still a work in progress. I'm aware of that. We're trying to communicate that to the patrol shifts to make sure that they are still doing what they can to do proactive policing within the city. And we can talk more about the crosswalk mission also here in just a few moments. You look at the calls for service, you can see basically a steady decline from January 21st down to the present January 22nd on self-initiated activity. We would like to get that up. There's some barriers that we have. Our call load, our dispatch call load. If you look over the history from back to 2017, stay within a fairly parallel line or a fairly horizontal line, but the self-initiated activity is peaks and valleys, and we would like to see that going up. So On the back, we have had an increase of about 10% in non-emergency calls, 125 versus 111, or sorry, 113 from the previous month. So that's up a little bit, not too impactful, but it is up 10%. Those are usually kind of non-emergency. They are non-emergency calls, so those could be property, those could be a myriad of different types of calls. Stolen vehicles, 8. I know that Councilor Minor, we talked about this a few months ago, 8 being a high number. We hadn't had that high of a number in a few years. Wanted to kind of give it a few more months. You know, the following month it went down to 4. Last month it was back up to 8 again. I don't have, yeah, sorry. I mean, it happens, you know, and the other thing is these are just ones that are reported. This doesn't include the attempted traffic stops where the subjects flee and we don't pursue because it's not safe. So that could be more. There's a lot of stolen cars that are happening all over right now.
Yeah.
So back to the car accidents. I've kind of changed my personal focus on some of this because it's the usual areas where there's a lot of commerce and large box stores and get a tremendous amount of vehicular traffic. That's kind of consistent month after month after month. After Wood Village Boulevard and Arata and Riverwood, that's kind of changed my focus. I'm kind of like I'm a little bit more interested in there. There was that one big accident where the individual had video of basically one car driving eastbound on Arata, blows the stop sign, and a car that was driving northbound on Wood Village Boulevard blows the stop sign at the same time, and they collide. You know, so you know, we did have one, and I think that might be the Wood Village and Arata call right at the top on January 2nd. And then 237 in Arata and another one at Wood Village Boulevard. So we did have 3 accidents out of 16 kind of on those 2 roads, you know, and I know that when 238th was closed, there was a lot of traffic was going that way. 238's open now. So I'm kind of wanting to keep an eye on how that looks over the next few months as we continue our pedestrian crosswalk missions, as well as maybe some more focused stop sign enforcement there at that intersection. The call log, nothing really stands out specifically to me on the call log that I feel it needs to raise a suspicion or anything like that. So I don't know if anyone else have any questions. I do know that in the past there were some questions regarding what the abbreviations are. So I'm happy to try to answer any questions on that. I haven't had the chance to see that.
I appreciate that key.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was making stuff up.
I do want to touch a little bit on the pedestrian crosswalk again. You know, the emails that went out, I appreciate that. I appreciate the kind words and stuff. You know, the deputies are out there doing good stuff. The weather is challenging and it was a very cold day out there. The sergeant that was running the mission said that within like 5 minutes, his hands were freezing and he was the crosswalk guy that was walking across the crosswalk. I figured that there would be some violations, and you know, Councilor Minor, I think you said the same exact thing, is that I was actually kind of shocked at how many there were in such a small amount of time. And again, had we had more deputies, we could have stopped more. We just didn't have enough resources. And we had 4 deputies doing traffic stops. So there was times where 4 deputies were on a traffic stop at the same time. So he had to wait until someone cleared up. That's a concern. And that's after there's the sandwich board is posted that's showing that we're doing it after the crosswalks were redone. I believe south up there by Lowe, 2 of them. So 2 highly visible crosswalks and whatnot. So we do want to do another mission there. We don't want to do them too soon, too often, but we do want to spread them out a little bit. And then in the summertime, so right now we'll do it during shift change where there's a little bit, we have a few more deputies because the ones that are on haven't left yet, and the ones that are on, so there's a little bit of a so in maybe the summertime gets around, maybe we do a more extensive, longer period one where we can get people off duty, like on an actual overtime mission, focusing solely on that. Maybe they do it for 4 hours. Based on this 1 hour, I'm a little scared to see those stats, but that tells you that it's a mission that's necessary. So
That is pretty clear, isn't it?
yeah, you know, and then Wood Village Boulevard and Arata. I went there one day and probably within 15 minutes, I did 3 traffic stops, and just about every car by definition runs the stop sign, the California stop, right?
Yeah.
But I was just stopping the negligent ones that kind of quickly rolled through, rather negligent and whatnot. And then when Mr. Dirks rode with me, we did 4 traffic stops, and I think we probably sat for a total of like 1 minute to do all. I mean, it was like I just put the car in park and you gotta put it back in
We
drive
didn't
again.
even get back to our hidey hole. Times.
So, and that's, and again, those are significant. I mean, they're running the stop sign. They're not, I mean, they're running through it pretty negligently.
Yeah,
So,
these weren't, they slowed up, nearly came to a stop, but no, they just went
Yeah.
through it.
Doesn't take you long if you see them roll through. I mean,
Yeah.
there's folks that, barely slow down.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And, it's a difficult spot to try to observe, to see the infraction and then to go do the traffic stop. So it's difficult, but we found a place that we could sit and observe. So definitely something that we need to pay more attention to, and appreciate everybody bringing that to our attention. One last thing before I give you guys the mic, I wanted to share with you guys that we used Wood Village as an example. We had a county commissioner come out and meet with the Hope team, go around with the Hope team to locations, and one of the locations we brought them to was around here. So we wanted to show her the partnership that we have with the city of Wood Village and what Wood Village did for the houseless population, like the showers, the garbage, electricity, the Wi-Fi, all the stuff that Wood Village does for the houseless, in support of the houseless, working in partnership with the sheriff's office, and use you guys as an example of what the housed and the unhoused can do, working together for each other to make it an inclusive community. Anybody can come to this park, regardless of whether you have a house or not, kind of stuff. So that went over well. She was very impressed with that. And thank you guys for the partnership that you guys have with us and with the Hope team. You guys are a big part of what the Hope team does. And so it's important that we have a good, strong relationship. We're all on the same ideologies about what the right way to go.
Was that Commissioner Stegman that you were, no, another commissioner?
Byron, yeah.
Was that yesterday? Or Tuesday?
Possibly, yeah, Tuesday or Wednesday.
Okay, yeah, because we saw a bunch of, folks out there. We're like, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah, so
Well,
it's,
good.
it was a good example of teamwork, if you will.
Well,
So,
that's great. Bring them out and boots on the ground.
So, Council President Nissen, before we bring Deputy Hidalgo up, did you have any questions at all for the chief?
I don't. Thanks for the report, Chief.
welcome.
Councilor Rios Campos?
Yeah, just 2 quick questions. With the data collected from the traffic, from the crosswalk, kind of what's the goal with that and what's the next step? And I ask that because that is it's a high traffic, not only for vehicles, for pedestrians. And as the weather gets nicer, it's just, that's kind of the only way people can get to Fred
Fred Meyer,
Meyer's
right.
and things like that from.
Sir, I guess in the perfect world, it would be to show data to where we could justify getting, those blinking lights at the crosswalk kind of thing, right? Because that's really what's going to draw the attention. What I'm worried about is the person that's down on their cell phone, looking at their cell phone, speeding, and then they strike a pedestrian, kind of stuff. I think, in my opinion, that those flashing lights, when they hit that and it starts flashing, it's like, well, what's that? Oh, shoot, I got to stop, right?
Mhm.
I think that is the best solution, but I realize that that's easier said than done. As far as what is within our wheelhouse and what we can do, other than just continuing with these missions, that's within our resources, within our budget, within, the constraints are regardless, is just to continue to focus on that. What we didn't do, and I wish we would have, was that we could have photographed it, photographed the deputies doing it and then put it out on our social media. We're not trying to be sneaky. What we didn't get to is, posting it out saying, hey, this Friday at whatever time it was, we're going to be doing a crosswalk mission in this area. I know a lot of people are like, well, why are you telling them? I was like, because we're not trying to be sneaky. We want compliance, we want safety,
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So other than just doing some more missions as we can. But probably the best solution for the city and for the safety of the community members would be get one of those blinking lights that when they hit the crosswalk button, it flashes and does all that stuff.
Well, and that was, I was gonna add, because we did go out for a grant for that through the ODOT Small Cities, and it was not successful this time. Information like that can bolster that type of grant application to show what kind of need exists in the area. And also, we've talked with the Grand Ron, who have future development plans for that intersection and developing something in partnership where we're not putting in, a couple $100,000 investment that gets torn down for a different type of investment. We can coordinate and actually make something that's good for us in the interim that works with their future potential development plans.
That's great, that partnership there. And again, just because it is a high concern. And then kind of my other question was like, roughly what time of the day was it? Because you said within an hour you were.
Yeah,
alarmed
that
with-
was, I want to say, like around 3-ish in the afternoon.
Okay,
So daylight,
Yeah.
it was a dry day. It was one of those windy days, one of those cold, windy days.
yeah.
So yeah, it was right afternoon, well lit and all that kind of stuff.
Like kind of right during that kids being out of school kind of time from what I
Yeah.
remember.
Yeah, and I do know, so we did have, we did have a speed data thingy,
Mhm.
this technical term.
That is actually the technical term. We call it the traffic thingy.
Oh, perfect, sorry. Yeah, so, and I haven't seen if we did. Wood Village
We
Boulevard.
just got that information.
Just got it. Perfect. So yeah,
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Well, thanks again for the work on the Wood Village Boulevard. I know that is just the beginning of what we have to do, but the data is important. One of the thoughts that I've had on that, among the, Greg said, we put in a grant to get the crosswalks and then we weren't successful. But I do know the Safe Routes to School initiative that has been going on for a couple of years in the county. I saw, in fact, I drove the road here in East County, but prior to the crosswalk, they installed speed bumps in a series of 4 or 5 of them. And while they couldn't put in a crosswalk with a light, they had at least tried to slow down some traffic. And I believe, is the county. And they got those put in. Given this data, and given what, those of us who live here and have walked those streets, is it possible to get, at least make an inquiry if that's something we can do prior to getting a flashing light? So anyway, the question I had is if you slow down the traffic before the crosswalk, it could help, at least, help.
sure. Yeah.
The speed bumps were those rumble strips.
Rumble strips.
Because those could be a nice solution for the intersection in Radowin Village Boulevard as well, to kind of wake people up.
Well, I think it certainly slows down vehicles. So
257 northbound used to have those as you're coming down the hill in Chowdale, they used to have those, right? And, same with on the side of the freeway, you swerve over too far across the white line, it's like, oh, it kind of grabs your attention.
Yeah.
I don't know what that takes to get that. I thought
We can work with
Speed
the
humps.
county, at least. See,
because those could come up if at some point we got some other kinds of safety equipment there.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah, and I don't know, we'll find out shortly, if speed is a factor on Wood Village Boulevard or not.
average speed was 30 miles an hour with the average speeder at 34.8, just under 35.
And the speed limit, Sorry.
Speed limit's 30.
Thank you. So,
So I mean, the average
yeah.
speed was the speed limit.
Is it 30 now? What was 35?
Wood Village Boulevard's
They
30,
dropped
Errata's
it to
35.
Okay.
yeah, and errata, I know that I think the average speed, if I remember right, was like 14% over, but when you put that into numbers, not too concerned about it.
And the, then the question I have, you've answered it, Eric, probably is, given what we know on the crosswalk or the stop, the four-way, in Nevada, what you can do is increase your patrols in that area. And then, but yeah, I don't know what else can be happening there other than those lines, as the mayor and all of us know. Stop where you stop. You
Yeah.
can't see.
Mhm.
So there is a little bit of forgiveness here that you can creep up there and be over, but at least you can still stop. You should be.
Yeah, you
Uh,
should need to stop at the stop line,
yeah.
and then once you stop, then you can creep up and
Yeah.
look, you know.
So it's, we don't need to talk anymore about it, but I just hope we can keep continuing looking at that four-way because there's going to be more accidents there as traffic gets busier, as the town center develops more. There is going to be a lot of traffic on that.
Yeah, you know, and maybe an unintended benefit with the increase in traffic based on the construction and what is being done there or expected to be done around there, that might actually slow things down a little bit because of more cars. There might be a traffic jam there that people aren't going to be able to go fast. So, but yeah, again, Counselor, that going back to the continued missions, to an extent, but also I think if we can continue to post those pictures that we didn't take, but next time we will on social media and talk about it and continue to advertise it, kind of stuff about showing that this is what we're doing and just raise awareness, kind of.
Yeah, and like anything we can do to help and support, I think, I won't speak for everybody else, but at least,
Sure.
I think we would be open.
Yeah.
Support
Like I
more.
said, I was, I think even all the deputies that were doing it talked also. And it was an education type one. We were, the focus was on educating and compliance. I think there was only a couple citations were issued based on the officer's discretion. So that's the intent is compliance and safety. So,
Before I ask my one question, I just want to say sorry to the folks that had 2 of those 8 cars stolen. I noticed the one address was the same and they had 2 vehicles stolen on the same day. About that. And then my question, so you mentioned earlier, there's, some debate around the area about traffic stops and how many there should be and so forth and so on. And personally, I'm glad that your percentage of tickets written is low and that, you have discretion to whether to cite them when you pulled them over and if you're even going to pull them over. And, now there's a bill in the legislature. I don't know where it's gone, if it's going to make it out of committee, but it would ban stops for minor traffic infractions like license plate out or taillight broken. And, if you want to answer offline with an email, that's fine. But I was just curious how you felt about that potential legislation and what it might change in terms of the work that you are able to get done.
as I understand it, it will become a secondary offense. So there has to be another offense or potentially a higher offense in order to cite for that. So I haven't read it fully and I don't think there's like exact clarification. We don't have direction. So, we'll consult with our legal team. Obviously, it limits our opportunity to ensure compliance and safety. A tail light is there for a reason. It's for, so the people, when they put on their brake, they can see the car stopping or turn signal is on. So we can see what the other car is intending to do. So there's safety measures around what a lot of these low level infractions are. And so if those are deficient, it could be a safety concern. I don't have the overall stats on the number of citations that the sheriff's office issues warnings. I don't think it's very high.
I think you were like 14% in the statewide reporting of the
14% of traffic stop where
Yeah.
it resulted in
where
a citation.
Result in a citation.
So, without fully reading the House bill or what it's intended to say, I mean, I know that other agencies in the area have stopped doing that on their own. There are other communities or states and jurisdictions that have already done what that House bill is. And I haven't seen what the results were or of that or the impact of that is. So I can't really comment because I don't really have a good answer to give you, sir.
Sure. No, and I figured I might be putting you on the spot a little bit, but thank you. Thank you.
But I do have an anecdotal story about that from my ride along that we pulled over a person on our little mission. Happened to also have a tail light out, and it was this dude says, "Hey, didn't just let you know your tail light's out. You should, think about getting that fixed." So is this used purely as informational, and that's not, a lot of people don't have mirrors set up in their home to check, their tail lights as they're leaving home or something. So
Yeah, a single occupant isn't going to be able to, jump out of the car, run back and see if their brakes are on. So a lot of times the drivers don't even know that they're in violation, or, hey, your tags are expired. You're like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. You don't look at your tags every day, kind of stuff. So a lot of the time it's just awareness and a reminder. Hey, don't forget to do that. Oh, thank you for letting me know. I appreciate it.
and Chief Hakla was called awesome at the end of one of the stops.
Good, good. Right, huh? Have Deputy.
Yeah, I'll have
Hidalgo.
Deputy Hidalgo come up. He's here to talk about some community members that he's been working with just down the street a little bit. He can provide an update with what the team's been doing.
Cool.
Thank you for having us. And that Miran coming out here was an example too, because ever since we were given the okay to tell people or let people know that, hey, there's these, been putting the word out there, and I think it's okay that we're not seeing camps or anything like that just pop up, because I know that, but that out there, but yeah, we have been putting the word out there for as far as the dumpsters, charging cell phones, all that kind of stuff. I think at one point not sure if there is Wi-Fi, but, or maybe that's a
It's
future
on
thing.
its way.
It's on its way. Okay,
Re-
that's what I
restroom-
thought. So we haven't been
restrooms
really
are
putting that out there. but-
Open. We're actually looking at lighting them for, again, it's still early evening, but it's dark.
Yes,
so.
exactly. So thank you for that. Today, I'm here to speak about the folks here at 240 and over here, if everybody who I'm referring to. Just give you a little backdrop or information on them. It is a couple with their mother. The couple are both about 50 years old, and the gentleman's mom also lives there. She's in early 80s. Actually, I spoke to her today. She's going to be 80. So it was recently brought to, not recently, it was brought to our attention by one of the local businesses out there. We were working on another incident, and they brought it to our attention that, hey, there's these folks parking back there, and they were parking in certain parking spots that were being rented out, something along those lines, and to just have a check-in with them and see what was going on. So like I said, speaking with those folks, unfortunately, they were one of the people affected by COVID and the job layoffs and whatnot. They do have an income, but unfortunately at this point, they just cannot afford to rent an apartment just because kind of unfortunate circumstances. The husband is working. The mother has SSI coming in. So like I said, there is income there. Don't have enough for an apartment to meet their needs. We spoke with them. We try to come up with an idea to best help them out. And that was kind of in the form of some sort of rental assistance program. And we work closely with Central City Concern. He's a part of their navigation team. So he can kind of direct us as far as like what would be the best services that would fit their needs. And so with his help, we have recently, I would say about a week and a half ago or so, filled out some forms so that they can get on the wait list for housing. But as I'm sure you all may know, that housing is incredibly difficult to get into at this moment. And especially during the winter time when everybody's trying to get indoors, cold out. So it is going to be, as far as I'm aware, a somewhat lengthy process. I think he gave no within a couple months or so. I think that that's being kind of a little bit faster, fast paced, but that is definitely faster than the service they would receive had they just regular route, which is calling 211.
Deputy, can I just ask you a question before you
Yes.
go on there? Where are they from? Did you say that? Do you know where they're from?
You know, I know they have told us, and generally I remember where they're from. Most folks are from, but I cannot remember. I know that at least it's the Portland Metro.
So it's not, it's not down the street from where they're parked. I mean, it's,
Generally
Gen-
speaking, the people that we work with or that we come across are locals.
Yeah.
That can mean, when I say that, I mean kind of like the areas that we patrol, which would be like
Yeah.
Troutdale, Fairview, Wood Village, Gresham area. For them specifically, I just cannot.
Well, that's all
remember
right.
off the top of my head, but I would say a majority of the folks that we come in contact with are
generally local.
from this area and kind of, they like to be out here because this is the area they're familiar with. Yeah, and so other than that, we've been visiting them about, I would say 1 to 2 times a week. I know that recently, and I want to, a couple days ago, that code enforcement.
Yep, yep.
Okay, yeah, she had emailed us about some concerns from other businesses and stuff like that, that their area may have been growing, which is something that we had discussed with them as well, because kind of them understanding how to be a good neighbor, so to speak, because some of the businesses were not necessarily allowing, but understanding of their situation, kind of working with that. So continue to work with them and keep all up to date as far as where we're at with them. And again, appreciate you all having us here. And
Council President Nissen, did you have any questions or comments for Deputy Hidalgo?
I don't. Thank you.
No questions, but thank you so much for all your work and just the attention that you guys give to those neighbors.
thank you.
Deputy, thank you, Councilor Minor. Deputy, would you mind a couple questions just about the general area and not necessarily about the couple and their mom that you were just telling us about?
Sure.
You know, you mentioned the Central City Concern Navigation Team, and of course, in the last budget, the Hope Team name was kind of changed to the Hope Navigation Team. Could you give us sort of the character of any expansion that occurred and who might be working with you and Deputy Cunningham and Sergeant Gerkman now?
So if I'm understanding correctly, you just would like to know the folks that we were working with or the
Well, yeah,
partnerships that
I
we
mean,
have?
what made it a navigation team as opposed to the regular Hope Team slate of the 2 deputies and the sergeant?
Oh, you know, honestly, in my opinion, it's all about efficiency. Because one of the common issues that we were running into was that we would find some folks, we would figure out certain needs, whether shelter, temporary shelter, Hooper detox, a rehab program of some other sort. And what would happen is that we would have to play the telephone to contact somebody else, who then that person has to contact somebody else. And then they have to come all the way back to us and let us know as far as, you know, what's going on. And oftentimes what was happening was that if you ask me right now, hey, I would like to get into shelter, unfortunately, a lot of the shelters are full. So it might take a few days. And if you don't have a phone, then things difficult and doesn't work very well. And so I think that with our partnership that we've been having with Central City Concern, and it just makes it in general more efficient to get people the services that they're trying to get a hold of.
And then is shower day still underway on
Oh, yes. that was
Thursdays
just
at
today.
Harvest? Good. And then do you have an idea about what the current population is out at 1,000 Acres?
1,000 acres, I think we're guesstimating about between 20. Right now, during the winter time, it decreases significantly because as you all know, it gets very cold out here versus downtown Portland where it covered from some of the wind. So that's kind of what we've seen in the summertime. It generally grows because it's by the river and stuff like that. As of right now, it's probably 25.
And then the joint office is rumored to be putting some navigation teams together as well. Have you had any contact with them or any luck getting help from the joint office here?
Not from joint office specifically, but it's just been through Commissioner Myron, who we were kind of talking about, and let her know that this is something that we would greatly appreciate, and we see success on such a small level in our area. Had, that availability of a mental health, medical, and even a navigator, more efficient to get.
Mayor, you asked the question and I, on 1,000 Acres, brief with my question and then leave it. The crime, is there crime there at 1,000 Acres that you are persistently responding to? Is one piece, and the second piece, you're still going, you go down there on Thursdays, and does that shower truck go down there also?
Well,
Or
it's
do we
at
know?
Harvest Church in
Okay,
Troutdale.
okay, all right. But anyway, just what is I've been in some conversations with a couple of people that have a far different view of 1,000 Acres. Maybe it's changing, I don't know, but do you respond to crime?
Absolutely. And I don't mean that necessarily in a negative way, but we kind of look at it as there is a lot of crime that come from house community members. There's a lot of crime, not a lot, but there's crime that comes from unhoused community members. And I think it's unfortunate that because you are unhoused, you have the stigma that you are, constantly out there for all the wrong reasons, and which for some folks that is the truth, drug and alcohol or whatever led them down that road. But we oftentimes run into a lot of people, such as the folks over here, where they're normal folks that just cannot afford to live in today's society. And whether they lost a job, can't afford the apartments, all that kind of stuff, and they're not resulting to crime. So I mean, yes, there's crime in any area, housed or unhoused. There's going to, with those folks, I think that there is generally less call for service, because up until they had the Hope team, most of their interactions with police was probably negative in the sense that it was like, hey, it's like an unwanted call where it's like, hey, you gotta go, sort of. So therefore, they're kind of thinking like, well, nobody really listened to me, kind of hear me out. So I think a lot of the crime went unreported, had something happen against them, And so I think now one of the pros for the Hope team is that folks are actually coming to us saying, hey, this happened, taking the appropriate response that needs to happen, just the same as any house member. If they said, hey, somebody stole my laptop or something like that, they have the confidence to reach out to us and kind of expect the same, as they should, expect the same services. Does that kind of answer, it's
Oh,
a,
yeah, I
it's a
mean,
very
it's-
broad, it's a very broad.
It's a broad question, but and I
Yes.
get the concept because that's what I have understood. I mean, I get it, that we got crime every place. Just because you're living in a
Well,
tent doesn't mean you're a criminal.
And sorry, before you jump in, one of the other things that we like to, we have noticed personally, self Deputy Epperson and Sergeant Gerkman, is that by continually going out to said locations where we find these camps, is someone who has that we causing troubles within that community, that could be, you know, criminally or something like that. Generally, those folks don't like. So we find that oftentimes kind of just, it kind of takes care of itself because want to be seen with police constantly talking to them. So I think a good chunk of folks kind of much like the house community where visibility, where kind of how you all were talking about the pedestrian project you had going on. And if police are in the area, people are more likely to, you know, slow down, like even if it's subconsciously. I find myself doing the same thing, and I'm in law enforcement where you're like slowing down, like, oh, there's a cop, I better make sure my lights are on, stuff, you know. And so I see the similar thing happening with
Thank you.
house community.
I appreciate it.
And, you know, just one thing that we tout from the Hope team that often goes overlooked is we're the law enforcement for the houseless, right? Houseless can be victims of crime. Majority of those will go, don't get justice, we rarely get dispatch call via dispatch via 1,000 acres. So the only law enforcement that is being done proactive in seeking them out, and because of their relationships, provide the houseless population with law enforcement.
That's the right, I mean, certainly, council believes that's the.
That's one of the things that Lieutenant Asbo brought up to the short-term East County Council on Homelessness that we had, was that while there is, you know, some crime in the camps, and we know that because we talked about how storage is important, so that folks can have their valuables safeguarded, keep them from being stolen when they go to an appointment. But he said that most of the crime is actually perpetrated on the homeless by the homed, you know, scams, promising benefits and taking what little money they have and never, you know, showing up again with any help or things like that, or drug sales, you know, or whatever. Mostly homed people that are committing crimes in homeless. Lieutenant Asbo. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right. So next up then is review of bills paid. Does anybody have any questions at all about the bills that are on the top sheet or that were on the list in the staff report? Okay, hearing
I'll
none.
move to approve.
Next up then is the consent calendar, and it sounds like Councilor Minor is ready with a motion.
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Councilor Newsom. All right, and then after that is then the municipal code update with James.
Share screen so Council President Nissen can see it.
Oh, hits.
Yeah, you can just click screen.
If when you do that, you're sharing it.
Yeah.
Counselor Nissen, you can see it?
I can.
All right, good evening, Mayor, council members, city staff. I had fun, our first discussion, and excited to continue it. Where we left off, reviewing the municipal code update on the last meeting, January 25th. Just a reminder, this is a discussion, so I encourage you to please feel free at any time to ask questions, give guidance. All right, a little housekeeping and a recap of last discussion. Staff was tasked to remove all gendered language, fix grammatical errors, formatting redundancies, and inconsistencies. We also made sure that the policies are not discriminatory, out of date, and conflict with current policy and procedures. A quick recap that is important. Council agreed with adding the preamble with a few revisions. The word perfect, as in perfect community, was revised to a more inclusive and realistic word livable. And number two, instead of the many happies in reference to the Wood Village as a place to live, council agreed on replacing the happies with inclusive. Quote, in the interest of the common good, we strive to create a more inclusive place for all people.
I know that we settled that, but can we back up on that language one time?
On the backside.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. In the interest of the common good, we strive to create a more inclusive place. Is it lofty enough? I mean, I know we can't make it perfect, but could we just, take out more and say create an inclusive? Because more could also sound like we were gonna stop short of perfect as well, make it more, but not all the way.
So a more inclusive.
Or just take out more, just
Yeah,
in the
okay, an
interest of the
inclusive
common good, we
place.
strive to create it an inclusive place for all people.
Perfect. Regarding Title 8, Chapter 8.04, adult care homes, the big change after researching was the county code. Apologize. Title 8, health and safety. Overview of changes were more inclusive term instead of using workman like craftsmanship was the term, replacing it with skillful and professional. I found this as best practices, researching other municipal codes and code publishing. Grammar fixes can be carried over throughout all the titles, and a few sections are restructured for efficiency and code flow and readability. Regarding Title 8, here we go, adult care homes. I suggest change reference from County Code number 503 to the updated Chapter 23, County and Human Services. I would like to make a small note on the staff report. I made a typo. I had a typo that said A3 and A5 after 8.6, section 200. To correct this, they should be Bs, so I apologize about that small typo. B3, delete or modify requirements on the commercial vehicles in residential area, and we seek policy direction on this. The current provision states a commercial vehicle which exceeds 8,000 pounds gross weight, 21 feet in length, or 8 feet in height, parked in the driveway or parking area in residential zone, unless it is a vehicle that is routinely on standby and necessary to use under emergency circumstances. It helps to clarify, Greg, if
Yeah, I mean, kind of the idea of bringing this forward is, is this still something you want on the books? For example, my truck, and I'm sure Council President Nissen's trucks is more than 8,000 pounds. And we're probably pushing 21 feet in length. The other thing, there are a few in the city, some commercial truck drivers that when they're in town, they park their truck at their home. And I get, to us, it's never been an issue, whether it's their little box truck, a semi truck, what have you, a tow truck. We don't really get any complaints from neighbors on it. So the question really is to you, is this still something you would like to have on the books to have an opportunity to enforce? Or does it really matter? Now, in terms of a neighborhood has an HOA or something, they can be more restrictive than that. But in terms of city enforcement, we just wanted to get your kind of pulse on, is this still something meaningful and, resonating with you all?
Well, one of the things that our HOA tries to do actually limit, commercial vehicles that have logos and things like that on the side of them from parking all the time. But there are a couple of people that live there for whom their commercial vehicle with their logos and everything and their ladders on top is their only vehicle. And, and so it's the way they do both their personal and their business travel. And, and certainly there's probably as many 26-foot box trucks as there are 21s, and so, and if we're not getting any complaints, then I'd be probably in favor then of removing language.
And the language is pretty specific and crosses a lot of lines here beyond. It seems like there ought to be some language though to address it if it is excessive. Now, if we've not had a problem, maybe we just say we're not ever going to have a problem. But if there's language there that could at least give us the opportunity to press it, and I don't know, and I'm not saying it's this language, a much broader interpretive language. So anyway, there's just a thought, but again.
So in my time here, I don't recall a single time of someone calling in a complaint on this. Previously when we did more proactive enforcement, because it was on the books, we, gave notices and things, but I don't recall getting a complaint when I worked for a neighboring jurisdiction. It was used because neighbors didn't like their neighbors. And so if they had, again, like their construction vehicle or something, they said, well, they're violating your law, punish them.
Greg, maybe let me ask the question differently. Could we still deal with a nuisance that might present itself, and how do we do that without using this language?
Or I guess to Council Minor's, the tractor, part of the rig, not going to cause a problem, but if it was, 70 feet of tractor and trailer.
Yeah, I mean, the issues become, are they parked on the street? That becomes kind of a street access issue. Or if they're parked in such a manner, even on their driveway, are they blocking their neighbors from seeing around the corners and things? I think there is probably something we could do, at least in terms of trailers, that aren't licensed as recreational vehicle trailers, because some of those trailers just as big as a semi trailer. But I think there's some things we can do around, maybe even number or quantity of these larger commercial style vehicles and their accoutrements.
Well, that's my thought. And I'm satisfied with the staff thinking about it. And if you think you have the tools you need, press it if it does happen.
I think we can probably tweak it a little bit, that the long hauler who's home for the weekend once a month, no issue. We don't want them running their entire fleet out of their home.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to B5, this is for future policy and it relates to sleeping and living in RV. And the reason why it's a future policy is because about 3 or 4 sections throughout the code addresses this of camping, unlawful camping, and House Bill 315 or 3115 addresses that. So I just want to note that this is for future policy to craft language.
We wanted to bring it up to your attention in case you said, why didn't we craft something new? And there's certainly this, updated state law about it. And we're still kind of waiting to get some model language and potentially some synergistic language with the sheriff's office and everything else and address it holistically. So we wanted to point out, yes, we are aware it's still an issue. So even though we're doing this comprehensive update, we're going to need to craft something separately on that particular matter.
Right, and further in the presentation, I'll cover that again. Section 816-240 deals with chronic nuisance abatement procedures. And after consulting with staff, this section will also be a future policy revisit and discussion. I would like to note that is a common provision throughout the metro area, and it was adopted by neighboring jurisdictions throughout the metro area, or language similar to in 2009 in response to the methamphetamine lab sprouting up in the area. So also the city has not had to use this in the past. So once again, we'll have to have a discussion to either keep it, revise it, or discard it. Under chapter 8.18 property maintenance, the city has no requirements for registration of derelict structures. So it is suggested to delete sections 150 through 240. In section 35, that refers to exterior conditions and derelict structures, there was no clear distinction between all property and residential rental property. So this caused kind of confusion, was kind of muddied up. It's important to define what is applicable to all properties, also to separate and what applies to the rental inspection program that we have. So clearing this up will create clarity in this chapter. Chapter 8.24, solid waste management. A few updates. This update included researching Metro's requirements and using the same language to promote, intergovernmental uniformity that eliminates conflictual policy. Following are suggested to add. Number one, standards for multi-family receptacles. A few examples are color standard receptacles must contain 30% recycled materials, and a few yard debris standards. Section 160, 3, we added a timeline to coordinate with Metro's timeline, and we deleted timeline in the business group table, just so everything's all nice and uniformed.
It basically matches up Metro's updated code for the business recycling. They revised for the food recycling, revised the timeline. And so this revises that timeline. And then we just got a couple weeks ago, Metro's new code for multifamily. So the timing was really quite good at updating our solid waste management code to match new standards that are continuous to be rolled out.
Title IX, public peace, morals, and welfare. Staff found redundancies with chapter 9.04 general provisions, as chapter 1 already covered this. So we recommend to delete it. Continuing with the overview, I would suggest to do a few restructuring, grammar and chapter title fixes to keep the consistency throughout the code. Staff seeks policy direction on adding a weekend provision to the unreasonable noise prohibited section. Currently, there are no weekend restrictions. The new ad will allow for construction noise to be permitted at a reasonable level between the hours of 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So I'd like to stop and
So again, this is very specific to construction activities where our current code is 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday, and it's not allowed at all Saturdays and Sundays. So then when someone, whether it's the buy away or something else, they have to call to try to get some sort of waiver. This essentially extends it to weekends, but instead of from starting at 7 a.m., you can't start till 10 a.m. and still have to be done by 5 o'clock, thinking if weekends people want to sleep in or otherwise. It adds that additional flexibility for construction work without necessarily impacting times to sleep in when people aren't getting up and going to work, et cetera.
This is more just like commercial construction, or even like if
It's
Area.
I mean, if
It's
you're doing like
residential.
your roof on your home.
Yeah.
Per our code, you shouldn't be doing it on the weekend, which is when a lot of homeowners actually work on their home.
Oh, yeah.
Regular, what about neighborhood commercial?
What was that?
This would apply to neighborhood commercial zone.
It applies citywide, correct. And so every time the byway wanted to do work on weekends, they had to call and say, hey, we're doing this, can we do it on Saturday? And we're like, there are no residents around that area. Go forth and have at it. And for
Yeah.
others that have called, whether it's, one of the homes that had caught fire and they're trying to rebuild and do things on a weekend, we always revised the timeline down to pretty much about what this standard is and said, look, we will do it for now, but if we get any complaints, we have the right to pull that authority to do your work on weekends.
I don't mind some flexibility, but I do have a little bit of problem with this. I live next to a neighborhood commercial. Not gonna wake me up because I'm up anyway. But if you have a family barbecue, doesn't matter whether it's, and in the neighborhood commercial is where I've dealt with this. And I've dealt with the owner and we've got an understanding. So they don't get out there and power wash equipment on Sundays, Saturdays. But if you're a homeowner and living in Riverwood and you're having a barbecue, I think we got to be a little bit careful about just saying homeowner can be tearing off a roof on a Sunday morning, whether it's 10 o'clock or 12. I don't think that's good public policy. I think it's reasonable to make some exceptions if there's I've been involved in, you got a person that is for work, and the only time they can get the equipment there is Saturday morning. I understand that. But I do think that we have to have some limitations. People might be power saws going, they're able to do it any. So
Well, for me, that's a little difficult because I don't think everybody has a Monday through Friday schedule, so, or,
I didn't hear you.
I said, I think that's a little difficult because not everybody has the same work schedule. So if they're only able to do it on the weekends, I mean, we're basically saying, well, tough luck, you can't.
Well, I think there's a limit to it. I don't believe we ought to have construction going on Sunday. I mean, that's my point. Now, I understand that not everybody can work during the week, but I don't think could just have it open. Start remodeling houses and construction activities going on.
Well, not everybody's hiring a contractor either.
That's
So even-
limiting.
So even if you do work Monday through Friday, if you're doing the work yourself, you might only have the weekend to do it on.
Well, and that would be, I guess that would be addressed to just a new.
I mean,
Right.
typically when we've got complaints of this manner, we get the call Monday at some point saying my neighbor was banging on their roof over the weekend. Well, by the time we get the complaint, it's already over. There's nothing more to do. Other
Yeah,
than
and
maybe
I'm-
remind the homeowner, hey, we have this provision where you can't do work on weekends. They're already done with their work.
My concern isn't as much neighbor to neighbor. I think that's generally handled. But my concern is more about bid work, commercial work happening. Hours, I think, are at least an indication that there are some limitations. But I don't, I mean, assuming somebody's pulling the permit and that permit says they're gonna be adding a garage or siding on the house. And it seems like the permit at that point, place to address if you have to work on Sunday, then we got to know what you're doing.
Well, I mean, there are projects, I mean, again, if residential wise, not commercial, pretty much if you touch a commercial building, there needs to be a permit, but a person could replace the roof, they don't need a permit. I mean, they could be nail gunning.
Yeah, well, let me use an example. They would need a permit, all right? You're gonna remodel the bathroom and you're gonna put in fixtures.
In that case, I mean, that's interior. There's probably not really any noise impacts with that one. And a different, I mean, the noise code, and we had James do a lot of research on noise codes because it's probably the most difficult section in terms of enforcement for a variety of reasons. If you use what's called a reasonable person standard and you try to enforce it, what's a reasonable person? There's no definition for that. If you use a decibel reading, you have to have certified equipment and gear to then take the reading to see if there's an actual violation. So there's no perfect code that exists. And another point to make is this is strictly for construction activity. Someone could run their lawnmower from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Sunday if they wanted to. And
Their leaf blower.
They can.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I accept that. All right, that's a neighbor to neighbor, just like I've dealt with. But that is the commercial. I just don't, I'm not comfortable with saying you can build or do anything you want any day of the week without some oversight.
Yeah, well, a lot of
And-
times the contractors aren't gonna work on Sunday anyway.
I mean,
They
we can
don't
also
like
just
to have
keep
to
it
work on
as it is
Saturday
now.
Because it's a lot of times it's, an pay for their crews, time and a half or double time. And maybe we could draw the line between, if it's a licensed contractor doing the work, then they can't do on Sundays. But if you're a person, doing your own work, that you can do it on Sunday.
Or just
And I
keep
wanna
the
be
code
clear with
provision,
this.
they have to just ask permission
Thank you,
first
Mayor.
and they get a waiver.
I want to be clear with this, and Councilor Rio Campos. I know that I was a contractor one time. I did work on Sundays. And I know that happens. And my point here isn't to take away anybody's livelihood that's got a side job. My point is just that we need to think of, I believe we need to think about this and create some kind of provision that there is at least some oversight in our. So I know the decibel readings. And that's one. Standardize point to at least begin a discussion with somebody.
And our code uses, I'll call it a hybrid model where it's clearly audible and has backside decibel readings, and which we actually had to use a couple of years ago, if you all remember, with a case, a home adjacent to an industrial area. And
Well, I think, I used it with a neighbor that I get along with well, and we work real well together. But at least it's a place to start a conversation. Some of those standards, I think, are fair to all parties. That there is something that you begin a conversation of, and a neighbor has at least an opportunity to have a conversation. Anyway, that's my thoughts on this.
On a Saturday only.
I mean, it's really, we're just bringing it to your attention of this is an area that we've seen some kind of oddness that could use some improvement, but it's a policy direction for you all to tell us what you want out of
Well,
it.
I have.
And you don't
another-
even have to change it, because right now it's Monday through Friday, but they can come to us and get essentially a waiver to do work on a weekend day.
Down northeast of Bellingham, when I was living in Bellingham, well, I mean, it's still there, whether I live there or not, I guess, but Linden, Washington. And at the time that I was living near there, it was more of a religious deal and a Sabbath. But you weren't allowed to mow your lawn or blow leaves or anything like Now, you still had to keep your lawn up, and if you, then they'd send out a crew and cut your lawn and bill you. But you couldn't do it on Sunday.
You know, unless you went. But I think if we left it and come to you, what's wrong with that? That not working?
Well, generally, I think there's some, again, when South River was being built, we would get calls from North Riverwood saying, look, there are pictures of plumbing trucks here on a Saturday. Yes, they were doing interior plumbing on a Saturday. What was the noise? Well, no, but they were doing construction work. Well, what were the noise? Well, they were doing construction work. So it's not really, you can't do construction work. You can't do construction work that has an overall impact on noise.
Well, and you also haven't solved your neighbor to neighbor issue. If they come down here and the city says, yeah, go ahead. The neighbor might still complain about the noise.
And then we would say, look, we got a complaint.
It's not gonna solve it,
Well, no, it won't solve it, but policy, as opposed to case by case, makes it clearer what's allowed.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, yeah. So, I don't know.
I mean, if you want to leave it the way it is, that's fine too. This isn't, it wasn't a fatal piece of the code. It was just an opportunity
I
to
know
have the
that
discussion.
At Tree Hill, when we gave the county the opportunity to work on Saturdays because they were behind, the question that I got asked most often is, when is this going to be done? Why are they working on Saturday? And so they actually were probably happy to see him out there.
Yeah.
And with that, we had the discussion. We said, here, you can't do this, you can't do that, you must do this to reduce the impacts. And when county pushed back and wanted more, we said, no, there are homes right there. Had this been some street anywhere else where there's, businesses, nothing going on at 1 a.m., go forth and do whatever.
I think I like that, having some degree of flexibility. So to completely say no, I don't think that's what we should be moving forward with. Again, I think we're trying to make something that our community can have the opportunity to be more livable. And so giving them opportunity to do some modifications or upgrades and updates during, some oversight, like you're saying, probably not a jackhammer at 10 a.m. or something of that nature. I think that's more the direction I would like to move forward with, just because, again, understanding that some folks who only have the weekends to do so, and and some of them, get up at 5 a.m. and the day goes by pretty quick, especially when you're doing big projects and you want to spend time with your family. So some of them do want to start a little earlier, and so things of that nature. So I think having some flexibility and maybe some just guidelines saying you can't do this before this time, house has to be done within a certain time frame.
And I'm not interested in shutting it down because I worked weekends all the time. And I needed those weekends to work on that. So I'm not interested in that. So I think we're going in the same direction here.
And I think we can look at,
limitations, some exceptions, but we want to make sure that people understand that there are limitations. Depending on
we
what
can
you're
look at this specific provision again with that lens. We can do that. And then when we bring it back in a couple more meetings, we'll call out that section of, here's kind of how we, massaged that piece of it. I think we got direction on that one, that you want to be flexible and you want to have a framework and backstop to it. So it's not run of the mill pounding 7 days a week as someone's building a new thing.
Noise conversations, they always kind of start to grow and, the what if. So thanks for.
But they're good conversation starters between neighbors, you see?
Yeah.
This is a discussion, nice and healthy.
East Metro Mediation or whatever they call themselves these days.
East County Resolution Center.
County Resolution.
We refer to people there a lot.
Okay, regarding attractive nuisances, Section 16-110.
I think I dated her, actually.
Suggested to delete because it's redundant with chapter 8.16. In section 916-160, driving and riding bicycles, adding references to the Oregon State statutes 8.14.400 through 8.1489 will be considered. And here's the House Bill 3115 again. So this is future policy regarding temporary camping and staying. I just wanted to give a quick summary of the House Bill. Quote, provides that local law regulating sitting, lying, sleeping, or keeping warm and dry outdoors on public property that is open to the public must be objectively reasonable. That's the key. As to time, place, and manner with regards to persons experiencing homelessness. After my research, the objectively reasonable came up many times as being the key part of that.
Did any of the places where you found the term offer a definition of the term?
No, actually, the definition was, I think it was left broad to allow for cities to create policy.
And that's what we're still waiting for, essentially that model code to be developed, because oftentimes, through partnership with like League of Oregon Cities, City County Insurance Services, and the legislature, they'll develop a model code that essentially can grant a safe harbor that as cities adopt either the model code or something exceptionally similar, if it's found to be in violation of the laws or the intent, it's a safe harbor where, okay, you don't get penalized, you have to fix it, but you don't get penalized for it. And so we're kind of waiting to see what gets crafted out of that.
Greg, I think we, at the last, that League of Oregon Cities meeting, that House Bill 4137, and maybe you've looked that up, but my note here to me is allows for temporary shelters under local control. So it sounds like there's language coming.
It's coming,
Yeah.
yes. It's just not here yet for this specific
Yeah.
effort. And we want to do it as a comprehensive piece of the code. So like we said earlier, we're doing a whole look at the code kind of but for that piece.
Yeah.
That's when that piece comes out. We'll tweak those sections again.
Yeah, and I contacted 3 different cities and they said the same thing. Eugene is very progressive and in this area of the unhoused. And they have a provision that is pretty forward thinking and it may be in the future. Moving on to chapter 9.28 curfew. After some research and cross-checking state statutes, chapter 9.28 follows Oregon law excuse me. So that's up to date. And regarding minors arrest, I contacted Chief Hakla and got his perspective on this section. It was written in 1963, and he said it's pretty out of date. A lot of it is pretty much kind of the same, but the language needs to change in the processes. So aligned with the staff suggestions, the chief concurred. I took these suggestions and formulated, number 1, changing the title from arrest of a minor to detaining a minor. That's the language Chief Hakla used. Number 2, instead of taking the minor directly in front of a judge, if the minor is not committing a criminal act, today the officer, when returning the minor back to their home or the residence, excuse me, they have discretion to determine if the living conditions are significantly substandard. And if they deem that, then they shall notify Child Protective Services. So I added that in that section, and I can work with Greg and kind of refine the link.
Yeah, it was one that's probably the most, I'll call it significantly outdated that we were concerned about. And it was, so again, talking with Jeff, talking with Chief Hakala, there is benefit from having this. And again, the example could be maybe there's a youth, someone under 18 hanging out at the park and it's 3 a.m. deputy rolls in, you know, what are you doing here? Takes him home, realizes home is not a good place for that child, for that, you know, young teen. And, you know, steps can be taken to, you know, hopefully improve their pathway forward. So it's not about stopping every kid you see after dark. It's more of a tool that can be used, you know, hopefully in a very proactive, positive manner.
Yeah, the ORS says may be taken into custody.
Excuse me.
The ORS, the language they use is may be taken into custody. Any minor who violates subsection 1 of this section or an ordinance established under subsection 4 of this section may be taken into custody as provided by ORS 419C. And may be subjected to further proceedings as provided. Basically, the top of it is no minor shall be in or upon, I don't know how you get in a street, but no minor shall be in or upon any street, highway, park, alley, or other public place between the hours of 12 midnight and 4 a.m. the following morning.
That's the ORS, you know, probably need to stick with.
And I think you could be in the street if you pop open, you know, a manhole lid and you're in.
Yeah, in the street, I guess so, yeah.
Probably like in the. Anyway. but
Yeah,
that's-
yeah, parks can't be there, highways, alleys, unless the minor's accompanied by a parent or guardian or other person 18 years or age or older, authorized by the parent or by law to have care.
Okay, moving on to Title 10, Vehicles and Traffic. Some general changes, we're adding city in front of the city managers, in front of the council. This keeps consistency, and deleting sections on bicycles, like impounding them, and the section on abandoned vehicles where notice of sale, sale procedure, and certificate of sale are not relevant because the city. Small changes in these two sections. Section 10.8.040 is just updating a few modes of transportation, like segways and hoverboards. And section 10.12.20, curb markings and signage safety provisions should be added to add specifications for organization, policy, and processes. Example, the city uses yellow and can use red to mark the curbs. That means no stopping, standing, or parking on the city. Here is an ordinance that we seek policy direction on. In my research, I did not find a lot of jurisdictions specifying this. I found this in Gresham's code and found that it might be a good idea to explore. I took Gresham's language and added a provision to add animals in it as well. I researched Oregon State statutes, codes. This may be refined during the final review of the code. Once again, I referenced ORS regarding children and animals being left in parked cars that are put at risk due to extreme heat, no food, no water. And the following I learned from last presentation. This slide captures exactly what it says. I don't know if you want me to read the whole thing or not. Just for record, I thought I'd put it up there.
I can read it and we're gonna talk about it again.
Does anybody want to give input? Guys?
You know, I'm reading the ORS again, and I think the highlight is that a person who enters a motor vehicle by force or otherwise to remove a child or domestic animal left unattended in the motor vehicle is not subject to criminal or civil liability.
Yes.
And so, you know, I think it ought to be that way.
Title 11 is reserved. And does anybody have any questions about the previous titles that we went over? Title 12, it was short and covered streets, sidewalks, and public places, along with general grammar fixes. Section 12.8.130, we suggest to add language that mirrors PDX code 20.12.140, in which it states, quote, "All animals shall be held securely on a leash under the control of their owner at any public park or recreational facility." And the thing I like about it is it specified the removal, not only specified the removal, but depositing of the animal's waste. Yeah, and specifies in a receptacle trash can, which our code did not. So
Hard to imagine 9-year-old trying to walk their black lab, that they're the one that's actually in
Fully in
control.
control, especially when the dog's on a harness that weighs more than the
Yeah.
person walking it.
The camping, section 12.8.1110, camping prohibited, currently restricts camping in any park, excuse me, at any time, day or night, and fall under the H.
Already talked like with like new park signs and things like that, how they're not gonna have that verbiage on there anyway, right?
Correct. I mean, as we look at our current park sign project, we'll probably just not include that provision as do not camp, in anticipation that there'll be some crafting of stuff, in a year or two. But as we look at signs, focus on the other aspects of what you're allowed to do in the park.
And our park signs do address animal waste, picking up after
They
your
do.
dog.
I think, again, in terms of working with the Parks Commission, there's a project to, do signage enhancements. And, John's been working well with the Parks Commission and other stakeholders about using pictures more than words, and then strategically placing where the signs are at, just so everyone knows the expectation, so everyone can enjoy the park, not worry about stepping in duty.
In the section that prohibited alcoholic beverages in the park, I added tobacco and cannabis. Title 13 was fun. It took a while. I wanted to say thanks to John, Becky, Greg for helping me with this one. This was pretty difficult. So in Exhibit A, there are many small changes like water department, and it's been changed to a more general term, city, to encompass the water service, and many small deletions throughout this chapter because of relevancy, excuse me. Bigger changes were aligning water and sewer together in one that keeps consistent. And this included aligning operations, billing, and the application process. For the inflow and infiltration reduction program, chapter 13.6, I suggest to delete sections 70 through 100 because the city does not do this. In chapters 13.8, sewer service, we should add a section that mirrors the water application and connection fees. Staff went through to make sure that the operations were systemic and verbiage was consistent with the sewer system to avoid the infamous copy and paste effect.
Forgive me if I knew this and forgot, we're past our requirements with Gresham for mitigating INI.
It was an agreement through our IJ with Fairview for INI reduction, and that was a 10-year agreement for $100,000 each year for a total investment of $1 million. That we did that years and years ago. We met that standard, and we're starting the negotiations with Fairview on an updated IGA with the intent of getting that language out, because at the time we probably did have quite significant amounts of INI entering the system, which impacted, not only our system, but Fairview's system in terms of relative, additional capacity. I think definitely through our master plan process, because we're doing flow measuring, we're going to get a decent understanding of what the INI impacts are in our community in terms of also doing smoke testing. So INI is actually still prohibited in the code. There's just this really kind of provision I don't think we even knew existed, talk about the city would loan you money to fix your lateral. We don't have a loan program. Through CDBG about a decade ago or better, we did do a CDBG grant program that fixed laterals, but that wasn't even necessarily a loan per se. It was a grant program that just paid the cost of the lateral. So again, removing the loan doesn't prohibit us from, either creating programs or doing grant opportunities or investments in reducing.
But if we remove requirements for getting rid of the Fairview requirement, but there are a certain number of systems in our city that are privately held.
We still have the ability to enforce inflow and infiltration for deficient systems in the city. We would just get rid of the loan provision.
Okay, all right.
Because I think if someone read that and said, cool, I need a loan to fix my lateral, we said, what are you talking about? And it's like, well, it's in your code. And then we'd be bringing it to you to say, apparently we have this loan program.
Yeah.
Chapter 1312, sewer rates and charges. Delete the customer class criteria because we do not do this. And in section 80, add 2 provisions, A and B. These were once again, it was borrowed from the water section and keeps consistency with the utility operations. A note on chapter 1320, which is not on the slide, retired citizens utility rates. This is going to be a future policy direction once I believe the SDC rate methodology study.
The overall rate methodology,
Right,
well, that'll be addressed as part of that whole process. So we weren't going to touch it here because we're doing the rate study separate.
Would you say the rate for retired?
Yeah, we have a retired utility rate for retired community members, and
I'm all
basically
for it. I'm
Call
gonna
the-
see that, I'm gonna
All
beef
you
it
have-
up a little bit.
is collect income from a retirement source, whether it be, a pension fund, social security, et cetera. And you get, I forget what the discount is, 20%, I think. So you could actually be a millionaire retiree getting a discount on your utility service.
Mike Bellotti moved to
Yes, that's
Wood
right.
Village, yeah,
Exactly.
collecting an
I'll be
immense
darned.
purse.
Well, about that.
And so if in the future, because of the rate study methodology, you decide to fix that, those who are currently on it would be, essentially existing non-conforming users of that program. There wouldn't be any new users to the program. So just because, if you were to change it in the future, those who are still on it would still be on it.
Sounds like you better quickly reread chapter 13.
I'll tell you what,
Call him tomorrow.
inflation now with that, maybe it should be 25, 30%.
Let's see, chapter 1328, it should be reserved for an ad. This section is from Title 15, Building and Construction, the title. After reviewing it with staff, it is suggested to be section. Makes more sense. The fluid is a lot better. As the delinquent charges section, I did not see in any other code. And the charges change over time, so I suggest just deleting this prescription.
Could I ask one question about on the sewer rates and charges and deleting the customer class criteria because we don't have it. What does class criteria mean? Because we do have like some businesses where we give them a discount on anything. that
And that's
evaporates
still,
and
that's
doesn't go
actually
back
still
into the-
prescribed in the rate about consumption use that doesn't go to the sewer system is a credit back towards, so on a commercial classification, you're charged consumption for your water, you're charged consumption for your sewer. So residential is just flat fee for both.
fee.
Commercial, it stacks based on consumption. And so there's still the provision in the code that says, if you're using water into a thing and it doesn't return to the sewer system, you're responsible for, doing some sort of, metering of that use. And that's reduced then from your sewer charge, because we don't put meters on sewer because it doesn't really work so well. But that's a way then to capture still, again, product, water that they're using, but it doesn't enter the sewer. So we're not being charged for it. They shouldn't be charged for it. So we still retain that provision. The classification it doesn't mirror what we currently do at all in terms of how we structure the rate tiers.
Title 14 is reserved, and Title 15, buildings and construction. General grammar structures, and we fixed a few gendered pronouns and language. Regarding chapter 1512, moving of buildings, the following suggestions are in section 1270, 151270, delete the prescription, and dollar amount should be deleted, and a provision added, quote, by a permit fee as prescribed by resolution of the city council. The next section, delete the prescribed provision of public liability insurance policy that it is out of date, and replace it with in compliance with Oregon state tort limits. Section 90 needs to be cleaned up and clarified that the permit may be denied based on the route and the condition of structure. And sections 100 through 110 delete because the city does not do this operation. And to close out the code, chapter 15.16 is suggested to change the first part of the title for modernization from trailer coaches to recreational vehicles. And in section 15.16.30, I suggest to add provision that mirrors the rental fee process to keep the consistency and efficiency in operations. And in chapter 15.20, flood hazard protection. This should be deleted because of redundancy. It's in our comprehensive plan.
The fact that our only floodplain is on 84.
Okay, and in summary, through titles 8 through 15, staff made gender neutrality changes, making the code more inclusive. We suggested moving a few sections and chapters around to keep efficiency and consistency. And a few bigger ones, adding a code that covers children and animals locked in cars. And finally, a reminder, once again, I kind of feel like I'm beating a dead horse, a reminder for future discussion and policy to be in compliance with House Bill 3115. And I do believe probably summer of 23 of next year will be. Next steps. Per council's direction, staff will draft the recommended revisions for a final review by the directors and administration staff. Staff will submit to code publishing after council's approval, then publish to city files and online database. And that concludes the municipal code. Does anybody have any final questions?
So we're targeting your first meeting in March to bring back the full comprehensive book for your adoption consideration. So you won't see at your next meeting. We're going to take time as staff to craft again some of the pieces you mentioned here this evening and double check and verify the components as a whole to make sure that it's a solid product.
Yeah. And how many more sections are there?
That's it.
This
That's
is
it.
it.
That's it.
Okay.
That's it.
Dang it.
Well, there's book B though. Did I mention book B? It's 1,200 pages.
Well, then let's get after it.
And I'm glad I didn't keep my time because there's many hours, but
Yeah,
I
well,
want to
good.
thank you. So,
Well, it's nice to have these updated and just for,
all right, thank you.
Thank you, James.
always kind of embarrassing to go to the code or go to a policy and you date 1963.
We had stuff from the 50s still, and I think the fees for moving home were like $1.12.
All right, so next up then, we have agenda item number 6, which is a community cleanup day discussion with them. Thanks, James. Municipal code, tough act to follow.
I was gonna say, he's gotta put a bunch of hours into doing all of that.
Yeah, we sat in a room and closed the door and left when it got dark.
Yeah, just the red lines, a few hours of work there.
Alrighty. Short and sweet. So good evening, Mayor and councilors. Today, we're requesting council to review and approve the event plan for the Community Cleanup Day. Just a recap from last year, we brought the event back. It was held at the Wood Village Town Center in front of the Lowe's parking lot. And due to COVID, it was planned as a self-service drop-off to ensure the health safety of our volunteers, our staff, and our community. So with the success of the event, we plan to replicate that plan for this year. It is tentatively scheduled for Saturday, May 14th from 9 to 12 p.m. I'm going to pause right here and show you a plot plan. So if you recall if your attendance from last year, it's fairly similar. Entrance is on the top right here. And then this is for the check-in area. Number 9, that is where the Green Century Electronics was located at. And then down here was the waste management, and hoping to have 7 bins there instead of 5, crossing my fingers. And just planning to slightly move the tires right below here. So that would be the layout. Any questions on this?
Are we moving tires because 7 fills the space?
Yep.
Because you could have somebody that's gonna have to go through the line and then go through a line.
So
Doesn't look
really
like
the
there's a-
idea was, because last year, I'm sorry, Mayor.
So-
Are you saying that maybe if it's just tires, you
Gonna roll
short
it.
circuit the line or?
No, we need a yellow line, I think, that tells you how to get to the tire bin if you were at
Oh, okay.
bins 1 through 7,
Yeah,
dropping
yeah.
off trash.
Correct. So
Or if you had the tires on top of the trash to hold it all down, then, you know, how do you get from 8 into 1 through 7 without going to the back of the line?
Would probably just roll the tires. I mean, that's what
Yes.
we did last time is it depends on, again, like you said, there's going to be the people that come with the whole trailer load. Fine, direct them just directly to the tire bin. There's ones that are mixed and you just kind of either stack them next to the dumpster, then roll them later, or have them drive back around.
Is there, if we put the tires there, is there room for waste management to grab like bins
yes.
4 and 3?
It's not quite to scale. It's a significantly smaller box for tires. The other thing to point out is this is primary location. I don't know if, and we'll talk about it, but it's possible that this site will be under construction in the next several months. So there's also backups to the backup to the backup. But the idea is, again, trying to conveniently lay out the size to allow for as many bulky waste as possible, as well as accommodating the tires and electronics. So we had that too last year with electronics, where it was, some people just had like their computer, so they just kind of dropped it off and left.
Right. So from last year, really in the center, if you recall, the tire was like right in the middle. And we did use a total of 7 bins. So I would kind of think that it would be more convenient to actually have all 7 bins this year, if that could just be placed. And then an individual could just roll the tires in the back, or a volunteer could do that.
My vantage point standing around welcoming people, it looked like our staff and volunteers were actually working pretty hard
Oh, yeah.
unloading people's cars. And so are we even going to entertain the thought that it should be self-service or just?
So the difference between, I call it last year and previous years, where it was really titled this year as self-service, people came last year expected to unload their stuff. So it was more of a pleasant surprise when there were volunteer help. It also led that you can kind of tell the person pulled up and just stayed in their car. We let them stay in their car until they started getting out and unloading their stuff. But kind of set the expectation that there may or may not be, set the expectation that there won't be help. You have to unload it yourself. And it was more of then a pleasant surprise when there was people to help assist, whether it's because it was a person that needed help or because the line was getting back up and needed people to get out of there, quicker than what they were moving. So setting up the expectation, you unload it yourself with then, hopefully then some volunteers to help
I thought that worked pretty well
It did.
last year.
Yeah, not
because
saying, I mean,
don't-
volunteers still worked
Yes.
pretty hard.
Yeah.
They did.
But also set a different expectation. It felt different than previous, whereas where some people they just sat in their car. And you know, that's
people
not
that We
okay.
need to help them, so, you know, all right. Steph down there, we're doing.
Just kind of
actresses.
adding on what Greg was saying, there were no complaints and, you know, we had a lot of happy attendees, so our volunteers were still helping. But on that note, on this plot plan, it is sensitive and we're keeping an eye on it. Like what Greg was just mentioning earlier, there may be a construction. And if there is, we do have a backup plan. So one of the option is probably the Grand Ron property or the parking lot in front of
Coles,
I kept
not
saying it. I thought
directly
Lowe's.
in front of, you know, a little further south, not directly in front of their store. I don't think they'd
Yeah.
appreciate that.
So those
Right
are
in
the-
front.
Yep, right in front. So those are the two.
You know, one of the conversations that Pastor Miles and I have had on a couple of occasions now that City Hall is open is that there might be some distance in the relationship between the city and the church because we don't hold events there now because we hold them here. You know, have asked them at all if they wanted to be in line for the backup plan?
That was the other backup to the
Okay,
backup.
that was the backup to the backup. All right.
Backup.
Yeah, because when they paved their northern part, that's where we used to hold the events. We had to switch it to the western part where it's all gravel. It was a little clunkier on that western end than it had been previously, but it's still a nice site.
Yeah, I'm glad that you actually brought that up, so thank you. So pretty much the list of items similar like last year. So the items that, you know, the bulky items we're accepting are appliances, electronics, furnitures, mattresses, general household items, scrap metals and tires. We are not taking any sort of construction debris or hazardous waste chemicals and household garbage. And the alternatives, council may choose to revise and modify the event or not have the event at all. The budget is $500 and it covers the cost for snacks and light refreshments for our volunteers, signages, safety supplies, and then the e-waste disposal. So if approved, our next step, we will implement the plan or advertise and coordinate the event plan. We'll follow the state and health measures as well as keep an eye on that construction site for that. Having this event will hit goal number 1, 3, and 8. And here's the suggested motion.
Before we have the motion, Council President Nissen out there on the phones, did you have any questions or comments at all?
I don't. It all looks good to me. Thanks, Em.
Thank you, Counselor.
Anyone here have questions or comments?
No questions.
I
Right.
had a quick question. How many volunteers did you have last year? And was that enough or did you feel that more would have been pleasantly better?
For something like this, there's never a shortage.
I
Had-
say more.
We had
It doesn't matter how many. you
10
had more.
volunteers. Those things were heavy.
Yeah.
So
And I believe the bulk of volunteers were either city staff and or their families.
yes, so bare minimum 10 volunteers, but if we could get more, that would be awesome.
Oh, sorry, city staff, electeds, appointed, and their families.
And last year, the event was from 9 to noon as well,
Yes. It was 9 to 11,
9 to 11.
9 to noon. Correct, yes.
Then my only, I guess, comment was, I guess, you know, it comes to, they didn't read the newsletter. And so I
Okay.
know we advertise it in there, but a lot of folks were like, oh, we weren't sure of it. So
Okay.
I think any way we can help to promote it, I think
Sure.
it's a great opportunity, even, you know,
Okay.
for us individually.
I think
to-
in the past year, there's been a lot bigger, I'll call it following, whether it's our website, social media, and then, you know, certainly the newsletter. So I think, you know, using those channels that have grown the past year, I think should hopefully close some of those gaps, and especially again around translation as well.
Counselor, so aside from, I guess, newsletter or social media, are there, I guess, other thoughts from that we could best reach them to know about the event?
For me, it would just be word of mouth. I think it's just,
Okay.
you know, getting, letting people know ahead of time so then they can share with families and friends. And so I think that's
Okay.
the best. And I think last year last year there was some confusion
Yeah,
of the location
Mhm.
and then the church was under construction. So a lot of people thought it was there.
Because they saw the drop boxes.
Yeah, and
and-
so I think
Oh.
this time just, you know, I think anticipation, which I know you guys will be working on.
okay,
think
yeah,
that
whatever
does-
that we could do to make it better.
Yeah. I believe we're doing like a little teaser article in the newsletter for the March, and then we'll have, you know, the full big stuff again with the map and all that for the May 1.
What signs? We use a kind of a sandwich board sign there, don't we?
For the entryway and things. So
Yeah.
this one, because it's, you know, we want to keep it Wood Village only, we don't do a lot of the larger banners and things because
Right.
we don't want to confuse
Right.
folks from Fairview, Gresham, Troutdale,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Well, and then my idea there, very good, is to put out the day before. So that driving in Wood Village, I mean, sign and it would remind them that's tomorrow. Now,
Oh, okay,
that's assuming the sign will stay there overnight.
right.
We also
But I mean,
parked,
I think when you drive through there, when you see that sign, it could remind people that.
we also parked, you know, the event truck right up in a nice visible spot that had,
Yeah.
you know, Wood Village and the
Yeah.
canopies and then.
Yeah,
you
it
know,
looks good. I mean, it attracts people.
Okay. Oh, I'll make a note of that.
Entertain the motion.
I move to approve the community cleanup day event planned as presented or modified.
Second.
All those in favor?
I,
Aye.
Right.
Thank you.
Next up is agenda item number 7, resolution 4-2022 surplus authorization with John.
All right. Problem.
Title's wrong.
What's that?
Title.
Good evening, Mayor and City Councilors. The resolution on the screen should read as Resolution 4-2020. Correct down below in the recommended approval. So what you have in front of you in your packet, you were provided Resolution 4-2022. Really disposal of surplus vehicles. The budget, you approved purchase of a new vehicle. We are looking to surplus 1995 F-150 with plow and sander and a 2011 Ford Ranger. Per resolution 3-2012 and ordinance 8-2002. Council authorization. Unknown fiscal impact at this time. Once we surplus items, will probably go through the Oregon surplus through the state, and the funds will be distributed as they were collected, so to speak, purchased. This does support city goal number 1. With that, any questions?
Basically, when we get the new vehicle that you all authorized at the
Yeah.
budget season, we're gonna surplus the ones that's replacing. And that's why we don't know the budget impact. We don't know what people will pay for them. The car market is intriguing, we'll call it.
questions from
No
me?
questions? Council President Nissen, any questions?
No, sir, no questions.
All right, then I'd entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve resolution 4-2020, authorizing declaration of and snow and ice attachments as surplus. Authorized disposal.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, John. So next up is discussion of our utility assistance program with Seth.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. So, utility assistance funds. As you guys all know, we received our ARPA funding. Brought it to you at September 14th council meeting to discuss the possibility of using part of the ARPA monies fund the utility assistance fund, similar to what we had with the PDX CARES funds from 2020. On October 14th, council approved as part of the supplemental budget $80,000 of funding for the program. With that, the program started in November. So, and at that time, council directed staff to check in with council 3 months into the program to see how things were going. So one of the things that we did that was a change from the PDX CARES was we started gathering information on program participants who was voluntarily reported as part of their application. So the first graphs that we have here are at family size. So out of 55 unique applicants, the majority of them were households that had children. Look at that graph. Looks like about 12 of the 55 had only adults in the household, and the rest had children there. When you look at, so the top graph here is the number of applicants. You look at the actual dollars distributed, it very closely mirrors the number of applicants. Similarly, one of the things that we asked and had a robust discussion on with council was income and kind of what the program was designed for. And there were some questions that were added for verification for participants in the program. So this is the data that we collected that was reported by people who are applications. In most cases, we didn't verify this, but this was self-reported. And I will note that we didn't have anyone who self-reported more than $4,500 worth of income on a monthly basis. You'll see on the did not responds that there were 10 people who chose not to disclose their income. Going back and looking at that, we were able to determine that 9 of those people said we don't have income, but did participate in one of the qualifying programs. So it's likely that even though they didn't fill that section, that part of the application out, that they would have fallen somewhere in the on kind of in this area. And again, we're giving it to you by total number of people, households that applied, and also where the money went to. And again, they're fairly similar. On the right here is kind of we had a good mix of programs that people could self-declare. And this is the counts of of the applicants that self-reported in these. And I just want to be clear that this is going to add up to more than 55 because a lot of people reported more than one.
More than one.
And we didn't require that people report everything. A lot of people reported 2 or 3. But the reality is if they qualify for 2 or 3 of these programs, they probably qualified for more. They just didn't report it. But by far, SNAP and the Oregon Health Plan were the top 2 ones that people used in this. And there was only one case where someone didn't participate in any of these programs. And we did have to do some calling to verify with the person's landlord that they income restricted. And basically, the landlord was also their employer. So that was, I think, the only case where we didn't get income verification and didn't had to follow up. And there was also only one case where when we asked, someone submitted an application and didn't have a stated income and we asked for it, that they resubmitted and only applied for the city utilities and basically took their private utilities off the application so that because they didn't want to answer. So we did have some unique cases, but again, those were one-offs out of the 55 applicants.
It's ironic that we're paying electric and gas bills though, and that no one is in the low income home energy assistance program.
At least they're not reporting.
And one thing, I don't know if it's because of this, but because we listed so many, I think there could be cases where people start researching those additional programs, because we certainly have some cases where they were in an application status for a couple of them, like they were recently applied to them.
Yeah.
So I like to believe that because we listed all of them, people now knew of them. I don't know that to be true. I
Well,
like
you
to
know
believe
what,
it.
though? I mean, listing those could help some.
Yeah,
people.
and maybe a little blurb in the newsletter, maybe, not an article or anything, but maybe like a box that explains that low income energy program.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or QR codes to the links.
It's your hyperlinks.
The people.
So I remember, if you guys recall from the discussion that we had at council when we first brought this up, there was a lot of unknowns about, is this sufficient for income verification? Is this actually going to work? Are we going to get pushback? Is this going to go to the people that we want to direct it to, the people that are most in need? It seems like 3 months in, the program is working. It's going to people who need it. The process is fairly smooth for doing the income self-reporting and doing the verification for the participation in these programs. At least from staff's perspective, it seems like the program's working well, and we wouldn't recommend adding additional income verifications, pulling it out, or not asking, because it was very enlightening to see who was applying and gather some of that information so that we could get a better idea of what the need was in the community, what the make.
I certainly appreciate the conversation we had previously. And now looking at the data, because I think many, but collecting this data, number of reasons, but certainly reinforce what we want to do. To make it, but there is some processes you need to. And your note here in your report, Seth, that it doesn't appear. Look at that, there shouldn't be. But
Yep.
in the end, it still meets our fiduciary responsibility.
Sure. But it also shows that anybody that criticized us for, being rubes that we're going to be taken advantage of in our first program, that we knew who lived here and
Yeah.
that we weren't taken advantage of.
Yeah, and you guys remember Karen before she retired, and Lindsay both do a good job of. A lot of times when they get on the phone or someone comes in, that person wants to talk, and let us know kind of what's going on in their life, how things are going, give us a little update and a little human contact. And so they have a very good sense for who's who in the at least that wants to come in and talk to us.
Mayberry touched it.
But I also think this works as, we know potential programs and partnerships that we.
And we do have the application in Spanish as well. So it is fully translated. And when we get information back in Spanish, we get it translated back for us to process and things. So it is hitting a very good cross section of our community. And I think, there are a lot of people living on not a lot of resource.
So I did note in my report, the staff report, that we have spent about 48,000 of the $80,000 that was appropriated for this program. Within the last week, we spent an additional 6,000. We have about $26,000 left, which is not unusual because this was the first week of the month, and so the bills came out and we got applications in. But we wanted to also to kind of talk about how to wind down the program, and what kind of the options would look like. And so we gave you some information on, of those applicants, how much benefit had gone to any one person. And so you can see that the high was around $2,700, but in general, 2/3 of the people had received less than $1,000 worth of total benefit. So, and with the status update on the wind down, had another slide, but I must have hallucinated that one. So it is in your staff report on the back. We did do some projections and pulled because we're anticipating starting shutoffs in March. We looked at the back bills for city utilities. And we did some projecting that we've since updated for the new round of folks that have come in. We think that there's about $27,000 of the accounts that are behind by more than 1 month. When they get to March, if they haven't paid anything, kind of projecting what their February bill might be, that's going to be about $27,000 if nobody pays anything. That generally doesn't happen. Usually when we start sending people out for late fee note, start charging late fees, start giving them the shut off automatic calls and turn those back on, we start to get, good compliant people coming in to pay. The concern is that if we start the March shutoffs, that we might get a lot of people that are applying for the first time because they just, for whatever reason, haven't responded to any of the outreach thus far. So we might end up having a big wave. And what we wanted to make sure and do was make sure that we had enough resource left to accommodate that in a way that was equitable, even so that, even if they hadn't taken advantage of the program up to date, there was still some resource left if they were in need of that. So those are kind of the considerations. It's getting kind of down to having spent through the funding. We do also have about $10,000 between the council's annual appropriation for utility assistance and the donations. That program is just a one-time or once every 12 month that you can apply to kind of help buffer that. But even with that, I don't think that we can continue to do the private and public utilities at the rate we've been doing them, because we'll go through about that $80,000 in 4 or 5 months. And we were thinking that we would be able to stretch that $80,000 would have stretched more over like 8 months rather than that. So you guys have some options, policy direction. Option 1, we can continue the program as is until funding runs out. Other options, kind of interim options of winding down, is that we could moving forward, we only pay city utilities. We kind of let people know that, hey, paying private utilities, but now this is only going to be applicable to the city's water and sewer bills. We could give priority people who hadn't applied yet or who hadn't gotten the most benefit. And that's where these kind of, a lot of people have only applied once. And there are some people who have gotten more of the benefit than others. And we don't necessarily know why, but they have been taking full advantage of the program. Another idea is that there might be, I think that there was somewhere around 60 accountants that made up that $27,000 of more than 1 month behind. And we only had 55 applicants. We have 64 people more than 2 months behind on their water bill. So we know that not everyone has applied just by me using my fingers. So there's a thought that maybe we do allow some private utility payment, but only for people who haven't applied yet. As we start going out in March and reaching out saying, hey, you need to pay your water bill. By the way, we have this program. You've already gotten your PG Northwest Natural Gas paid, then great. But we're going to try and reserve some of the funding to help people who, for whatever reason, haven't applied yet and might have a need for their PG or Northwest Natural Gas bill. The other option you have is you can always appropriate additional funding for the program, and that's kind of at your guys' discretion. So
How easy would it be to do to target the first time appliers that, how difficult would that be to administer?
well, it would be relatively easy to administer. We would just have to communicate with folks as they do the applications, which I feel like we do a fairly good job of that, just in terms of when we've reached out to people about their confirming their participation in either SNAP or OHP or one of those programs that's listed. We generally have, it's not a short conversation because we need to walk them through the process of what documents we actually need. And sometimes there's a back and forth conversation that we have. So I think that we could communicate that when people apply or when we get the application in, just kind of let them know that. What we're trying to make sure is, and we had a discussion as staff of, we want to make sure that all $80,000 gets spent this fiscal year. It's not something that we want to roll over. We want to spend that 80 so that budgetarily we're clean. But at the same time, we don't want to run out of money if there's a big surge in March. So we're trying to figure out what's the sweet spot there, if that's the funding.
Just
that we-
going backwards on this, when I was reading this and numbers have changed a little bit. This agenda came out earlier, but I get where we're at. I'd like us to have some money left over, a pool of money that would allow somebody late in the game access to money. So I'd like to see something left. That was one of down in here, Seth, someplace to have a fund that would take us through till. And you know, that fund that was the contributions, that money, some money that would
There's a priority. People haven't applied yet. I mean, we've been with a couple of stops. We've essentially run the program for nearly. And, you know, if you've had problems and you haven't applied, you've had ample opportunity to learn about it. So, you know, I don't know that, I mean, I want to help everybody that needs the help, but I don't know that I'd give them a priority, particularly, you know, since like Greg and I were discussing prior to the meeting, a lot of people that have applied more frequently, it's probably just because their circumstance hasn't changed. You know, if they lost their job, maybe they don't have a job again. If they were making $15 an hour at the beginning of the pandemic, they're probably still only making $15 now. And so, you know, it's, you know, $100, $200, $800 worth of utility bills paid on their behalf is still just not enough for them to be able to catch up and get ahead. And so, you know, I wouldn't want to penalize necessarily buyers either. So I like option 3 simply because you know, if we add money, we could kind of do what Council Minor is talking about, have some that we, you know, need to spend and expect to spend, you know, left over right towards the end of the budget year. But then maybe also be able to do what we've done on a couple of occasions is true up everybody that's behind on their water bills, and then but still have, you know, money to keep paying private utilities. And then another question I had for you, Seth. You know, I was wondering about allocated versus spent. And so has to be spent, I think Greg told me by 2026, and the allocations have to be made by 2023.
2024, and that's applies mostly to construction projects. So
Okay.
A program like this would have to be done by 2024 unless we contracted with another agency for them to spend it. Basically what that does is it allows you for construction projects to go through the bidding process. As long as you have a contract by 2024, you can have 2 years to spend it. It's This is kind of more pay as you go. So I don't know that there's a way that we could encumber the funds to allow it to continue through 2020.
Yeah, so my thought was, take 5K towards put it in our regular utility program, anticipate spend it by 2020.
And I will note that the regular utility program, council can do what it wants with the annual allocation that comes from council. Donations, that program was set up so that it was utility only.
Yep.
And we would have to actually change the program.
No, I would still advocate for leaving it city utility only and,
Yeah.
and even just a one time a year, but to be able to sure that we help more people with what was this wrong way to term it, free money. Had to endure to get it. Council wouldn't necessarily have to allocate out a future budget program more robust.
I would want to say, we're coming out of the holidays and kind of a harder time. Maybe getting into March and further in the year, we can feel a little more alleviated with having more job opportunities, that nature. As I understand, there's a lot of people that need the better weather to work, construction, landscapers and things of that nature. So I don't know how quick of a response you guys need to move forward, but I would want to see maybe, what March brings and, are those funds going as quick as possible again? Because, again, we just came out of the holidays. We're just entering February. And so
I think, the concern is with the money we have right now sitting in the pot and looking at just city, owed utilities. The concern is, fine, they're not coming in. We shut off the meter March 22nd. They will all come in on March 22nd. All that money is gone. And so if people, keep using it the rest of February, again, first part of March with regular bills, we were speculating how much could be left when, those that are get shut off and they come in. Would there even be enough to cover that? I mean, that's really the concern. So to run the program as it currently is, we're speculating it probably couldn't cover that. And so again, you get someone to come in, end of the day, sorry, program's out of money.
And we want to make sure that we are far enough ahead of this that people who have gotten used to through the programs applying every month, we're communicating with them what's going to be happening so that they don't show up one month and apply for it and be like, sorry, we're not doing this anymore. And that's the first time they found out about it, because that is not, not fair to them. But we want to do a better job of communicating and setting expectations so that then they can make adjustments that they need to respond to that, rather than finding out as they're coming in. And that's I think the bigger concern is communication with the people who have been participating and applying regularly.
I think that's real. Yeah, I agree. The deal is to make sure people. No, I also was looking. Cover their water and then private utilities. But running the scenario, in the end, we can cover water. Somebody destitute, not gonna shut their water off.
Well, not necessarily. The
Well,
statute is,
Let me just keep going here. We have that option to do it or not, depending. Private utilities, they don't care. They'll shut it off unless they got some help. So I don't know whether that's, I'm trying to work. If I get the question we have to answer here. One, we want people to know the money. Two, I think we're all saying we need a little bit of money. Other care of somebody if new the house and there's something. But we got that other sum of money that's gonna go. If I hear you guys right, possibly, March.
Yeah, it could, I mean, March program could run out of money in March. Whether that's likely, probably not. Personally, I would say if we don't run out of money in March, end of April is probably as far as we're gonna make it. Just based on what we've gotten so far, looking at what's been coming in regularly. Doing 10, we've done somewhere between, after the initial surge in November, I think December and January were both between $10,000 and $15,000. So,
So 60K essentially got us through 5 months.
and the hard part is that we had a lot of people that applied in November that had, $800 electric bills that they had already,
Yeah,
gotten on a payment plan with PGE on, to try and get out of that.
That's the concern too. If they haven't paid their water bill in 6 months, have they paid other bills in 6 months? And our water, their electricity tend to kind of run in step. If they owe us 800 in water, it's probably 800 in electricity.
And they would have to have made arrangements with PGE or natural, because as Councilor Minor pointed out, they will they have been doing shut offs, so you can't get too far behind on those anymore.
And I mean, pre-pandemic, after pandemic, there will always be those who they wait till their water shut off to come in to pay for whatever reason, no matter how many, the phone call, the door hanging, doesn't matter. They pay their bill when it's turned off. That will probably still exist. For some people, they just don't pay until their hands forced.
And so one of the options you guys have is we are planning on doing a supplemental budget on April 19th with the budget committee meeting to hear the proposed. We could wait until then and see kind of where we're at. And if you guys want to have us bring you something that would fund it through the end of June, we could bring it at that meeting. And that would also let us have a better idea of how the shut-offs went and kind of what we feel like the monthly burn is. That is also an option if you wanted to look at it. It's just as a philosophy, we could bring you the price then, but really you guys need to give us, you guys need to. I mean,
Right now.
no, it's
But
Yeah.
if we want to be good about communicating with people and setting expectations, letting us know now so that we can let people know kind of what the direction is and kind of prepare them is kind of.
But if we anticipate running out of March, and then we would spin it back up with the supplemental budget in April, that's a month where people could go with no help. And then we'd only have 2 months to spend whatever amount that we allocate.
We could bring you a number that would have continued it throughout. We have enough appropriation, even getting towards April, that we could make the program go from March to April until we actually pass the.
Kind of float it, if you would.
Yeah, sure.
And then
Yeah.
if we did a
So
supplement,
John,
close to
he
what I
can't
understand.
spend all the money in April, okay?
well, but if we did a supplemental budget and we added more, is that taken away from, next fiscal year?
So what it would take away from is what we would have, the other options we could spend ARPA money on. And hopefully, and the nice thing about having more time is hopefully we'll get some direction on what projects are out there on infrastructure for water and sewer as we get deeper into the master planning process. So
To me, it makes sense, just what you're saying right now, because I don't really know what to do. Because I don't have enough information. You've done a great job of tracking it right now. And if we can, there's sometimes kicking the can down the road is a good solution. And right now, I really don't know what would be the fairest, other than I'd like to have some money at the end, and I want people to know that it's gonna start closing down. And if you can, I certainly don't have I have no heartburn to look at a supplemental budget, if that's what's needed for our residents.
Well, it's coming to us anyway.
Yeah, so you're getting the
Yeah.
supplemental. We could just add this as,
Well, but adding this piece, I have no heartburn
And,
to do that based on the need.
and I'm guessing that that would probably end up being somewhere between $20,000 and $30,000 of additional. Just,
which would put then this total program cost at around $100,000, which is a little more than 10%. So we're getting about $908,000 total. So between this program, the computers program, there's something just under 800,000 that could be used as a utility infrastructure project, for example, which is still a decent chunk to help accomplish a something.
Well, and that buys something for everyone.
any money that ARPA spends on water or sewer infrastructure, money we don't have to raise rates for in order. Okay. Well, it sounds like, I just want to summarize, it sounds like you guys, the direction is we want to wind down the program end of June, have a package brought forward in April, kind of let you guys know what the bridge funding is, need to add in order to make that happen. But other than that, we'll proceed with the March shutoffs, but we'll continue to private and city utilities through.
And no limits on, if you've applied 6 times, you can still keep applying through, essentially through, you want the advertising to be, the program ends in June.
Program
June
continues right
30,
now as is.
that's the last day for money.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you. That gives us what go forth and do.
All right. Thank you, Seth. All right.
That
next
is a
up
good report. I appreciate the numbers here and the conversation.
Next up, Resolution 5-2022 Zoning and Development Code Text Amendment with Greg.
Hopefully something not quite as, robust of discussion, but you never know. So this is a text amendment authorization to do a text amendment process in their commercial industrial zone. And so why we're bringing this to you is because only the city council or planning commission can authorize or initiate a text amendment. That's in the code. So it couldn't be staff just goes, does it and brings something. Council or planning commission has to take affirmative action to authorize this. Now, again, this is asking to authorize the process, not any actual change to the code at this time. Just want to make that very clear. So while we're going to talk about what we want to massage, you're not adopting that tonight. You're just allowing us to actually do the work to craft it and then take it through the hearings, open houses, etc. So this is about our commercial industrial zone. That's essentially, I like to say everything north of the freeway, but there is a manufactured home park over there that's zoned residential. So it's everything in that light blue. It says CI. That's our commercial industrial area. So this zone was substantially modified in early 2009 to comply with Metro Title IV requirements. And that was Metro's regional work protecting industrial lands, essentially. So they classified industrial lands into 3 categories: significant industrial lands, and those were those very large lot, 100+ acre areas; industrial lands, which is just essentially any land that could be used for industry; and then employment lands. So they laid out 3 designations, and through their RTP, regional functional plan, that's where they outline where these lands are. And Wood Village has employment lands, and that's essentially in the CI zone, everything south of Sandy Boulevard. So Walmart, Camping World, those are designated as employment lands. Everything north of the freeway, or north of Sandy, are industrial lands. Why is that important? Because each one has distinct distinctions between what is or isn't allowed. And this is for non-industrial use, mostly pertaining to retail uses. Metro really didn't want these consumed by essentially big box retailers. So in industrial lands, essentially retail is limited to 20,000 square feet of total space per parcel. In employment lands, it was actually limited to 60,000 square feet per parcel. But the city's code just decided to do the more restrictive 20,000 square feet. And we were able to do that because Metro set a ceiling, but it didn't set a floor. So that you can't allow more than this number, but you can set anything lower than that than you wanted. And it made sense that the city just blanketed it the most restrictive, because again, it's just splitting it by a little bit no special overlay on our zoning map, so just fine. We're doing the whole thing, the most restrictive, the end. So it's everything set at 20,000 square foot limit. So you're thinking, well, Walmart's like 100, 200,000 square feet. That's existing non-conforming because it was built prior to the standard. They can exist. Now, if Walmart, if they're a disaster or an incident and they have to rebuild more than 60%, Walmart can't rebuild there. Same with Camping World, same with, we'll get to it, Gresham Transfer. So all of those uses are right now existing non-conforming. They cannot do any additions. They couldn't do any significant So the council then, in addition to Title IV requirements, they put in some additional stuff. So prior to the amendments in 2009, freight movement and warehouses were an allowed use in the CI zone. The Planning Commission and Council, and again, it was a good thought at the time. They wanted to try to induce the highest and best land use, which was more high-tech manufacturing or a larger investment type of industry. Building a big building and have lots of fancy, expensive equipment in it, because one, that pays a lot in property taxes, and they tend to have higher paying jobs than, call it retail or warehouse stock people. So they said, fine, we're going to do these Metro Title IV ones, and we're going to kick out warehousing and freight movement. So ones that exist can exist as existing non-conforming, but we're not going to allow them to do any more than that because we want to induce these bigger uses. It hasn't come to fruition and has caused some issues in the last couple of months as places down there want to expand and reinvest. So again, taking a quick look on what is allowed. This is in our zoning and development code, broken up in the commercial category, industrial category. You can see there's a lot of restrictions, not a lot of stuff used. So what we're proposing is, one, to distinguish between where our employment lands are and industrial lands. And essentially, looking back at this, you can see where the little asterisk is, the number 2. We would then further clarify that in employment land designations, the 1,000 square feet, and industrial lands, the limit is 20,000 square feet. That's the only change we have to do to the code. It's actually a pretty low barrier code change. We're not changing any zoning maps because Metro already owns on the functional plan the overlay. We're just now distinguishing, hey, depending on where you fall in this map, you could do other things.
There's also some kind of contradictions in there when you look at it.
Yeah,
You allow wholesale sales, but not warehouse and freight movement. So how do you do significant wholesale sales without a warehouse and moving some freight?
So that is actually ADESA is classified as wholesale sales. So even though essentially, at the end, I talk about this code needs a substantial overhaul. This section, the CI zone, we've done a lot of work in our neighborhood commercial zone. We're wrapping up stuff in our, residential zones. This zone has bothered me for about a year and a half. It just wasn't rising to a level to get to it. Well, now in the last month, we've gotten multiple requests to do new investment in the area and stuff that's not allowed that currently exists. It seems wrong to me. That doesn't matter what I think. That's why I have to bring it to you, the policy
Yeah.
people.
It's wrong.
Make the existing non-conforming conforming.
But if you also look, you can see lodging's conditional use, hotel motels, that's an outright use. I mean, there's some weirdness in this section. I'd also like to look at residential use more of in terms of mixed use, but we'll talk about that real quick because that is a huge process. What I'd like to do is a little process, distinguish between, the employment industrial land. So a person that wants to do a little expansion that would bring in good paying jobs and additional services can do their project. And I'd like to, for the, Planning Commission Council, consider bringing back warehouse and freight movement as an outright use. So again, existing businesses can do some investment. In talking with Sutton Trucking, who's there now, the council had concerns, and I agree, freight movement is a big parking lot. That is not a lot of tax revenue base. It isn't. There are over 80 jobs that are paying over $60,000 a year. Those are good paying jobs. You look at, nothing against Amazon or FedEx for the warehouse stuff. There's a lot of jobs. It's not a lot of money. It's like maybe someone can start, earn something. Freight movement pays. And as we've learned from the news and things, freight movement is critically important to our economy and area. And keeping it as an allowed use or adding it back as an allowed use doesn't prohibit sometime in the future. It's a parking lot. If big old industry wants to go there, they can go there. There's not a lot of, infrastructure investment in terms of their facilities. Yes, they have their shops and they're spending millions, yes, but it's not hundreds of millions like a tech manufacturer. So again, allowing it to, essentially be include sometime in the future for some sort of grandiose manufacturing high-tech thing. But as we've seen even from Gresham Vista, that was, I think the idea was synergizing around the existing semiconductor plant, not attracting, doesn't mean that we can't attract and retain high quality paying jobs. Talking with our planning consultant, she's putting together a little proposal to craft essentially these components and thinks it should be lower barrier because warehouse and freight movement was an outright use. Wasn't removed because of transportation means, it was just because of discretionary ability. We probably won't have to do a lot with the transportation planning rule because it existed at a time and the infrastructure hasn't changed. So it should be relatively lower barrier. Now, the future work is not lower barrier because Rudy would love to look at a comprehensive look, potentially work with Metro to reevaluate Title IV, especially for that south side of Sandy Boulevard, where there's existing active, essentially retail. How can we make those maybe more, first, maybe some residential there. Also look at our LM and GM zone part of this, because if we're going to look at industrial kind of manufacturing zones, we should probably look at it holistically. For the LM and GM, essentially that's everything just north of Halsey, between Halsey and the free outside of the neighborhood commercial zone. Want to look at revising Metro's Title IV map. They have their processes for that, but we can certainly try to do that. Something like that process is probably a year and a half total by the time we start it to it's adopted. I think we can probably do something here, wrap up by end of June time, potentially, with these quick fixes. So I'm not one to really like Band-Aids. I'd also like to accommodate the existing businesses that are there that want to expand opportunities for the community. So again, opportunities, you don't have to do anything. I mean, we've already told the organizations, can't do that right now. And wait to look at the zone until we do a whole comprehensive one. So not do the quick fix, but just do it as a larger process. Or the staff recommendation is, yes, we're doing a Band-Aid right now and we're going to bring it back at some point in the future, comprehensive overhaul. So with that, what questions do we have?
I think personally, that the Band-Aid fixes are the way to go immediately. But that, at some point in time, we should consider under 12 to 18 months, because look at those dates, 2009, they were trying to drag us out of a recession by creating jobs, but, clearly just, saying that the land had to hold, this many jobs. And so you couldn't devote the square footage to something that was only going to maybe employ 5 people or 10 people or whatever. Didn't help then, and while the economy is better, the demand for what's getting built has not changed. It's still the warehouse stuff. I mean, look at what Gresham Vista is. At some point in time, you just got to say to yourself, if you want the land to develop, then find a way.
And the technology change between 2009 to now with warehousing and distribution, there's a lot of actually built infrastructure with robotics and artificial intelligence that adds to the property tax value, because essentially big old computer that it's no longer just high rack shelving in a whole building. I mean, the quality warehousing are putting in quality investments.
I don't have any problem with
All right, Council President Nissen, do you have any questions or comments?
I'm only catching about half of what's being said.
Okay.
But from what I caught, I agree with going ahead with the quote unquote Band-Aid fix now to keep things moving along and then in the future going for a full-blown potential revision.
All right, thank you. Then I would entertain a motion on resolution 5-2022.
I move to approve resolution 5-2022, directing the city manager to innovate a text amendment process for the commercial industrial zone.
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Council President Nissen. I spoke before was second. I should have put the friendly amendment in there, but initiate, not innovate. But I think we all can read it there. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very
Motion
much.
carries. Thank you.
And while we wait for the executive session so the camera folks can turn off their broadcasting, I just wanted to quickly remind everyone that we're doing a Halsey branding effort on the 17th. So Trip Mulder will be physically here at the building, but we've also set up a Zoom link. Hopefully it works well enough for that. We also then are doing our DEI work with
Actually,
Tracy.
if you want, I'm sorry, if you want to slow them down, because Councilor Minor was also going to give the report on the LOC meeting that he attended.
Yeah.
But let Greg finish.
No,
but we
go
just
ahead,
don't
Counselor,
wanna
please.
go off
Go for it.
Oh, okay. Just as a, I want to go through the League of Oregon Cities meeting that I attended virtually. I'm going to hit just the highlights, but first is just a little editorial. Leah Homer works out of the governor's office, as some of you know. She was very impressive in answering questions. And Greg, you were on it too, but I was very impressed. She's our statewide infrastructure czar, and she was knowledgeable. She had facts, and she also had a way to relate to the questions that came that sometimes were, could have been, she was very respectful of the questions.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah, so she was, so I was impressed with that, with this person speaking there at the meeting. I'm gonna just, the upcoming funds, and Greg, you're tracking this way more than I could in that meeting, but we have the grant funds coming. They're 5-year funding from the feds. The criteria for applying for these funds, and I'm not sure what they were, but Washington is gonna set those funds. It's
That's
see
the
my notes,
infrastructure
infrastructure
bill,
funds,
yeah.
Broadband, water, roads, bridges.
And, again, we're not sure how all the progress is going to flesh out. There's probably not a lot directly that the city is going to be able to leverage or use, partly because for broadband specifically, they're looking at unserved communities. We don't fit that. Transportation, they're looking at probably more regional facilities, so not call it city facilities. And then for water and sewer, there's not a lot of there's a lot of dollars, but in terms of water and sewer projects, it's not going to go very far. And again, they're probably going to target those more rural communities. It tends to be that when you have a well-operated utility system and you've been able to fund things and you're making the sacrifices, do all the right things, you don't get the funding opportunities to enhance your own system. It goes to, I want to say, mismanaged systems. It goes to systems that the people need the benefit.
And again, this is a special session. It's about 30 days, and what's going to come out of there is a few bills, and there's 100 plus. I think can work to two something. So there's going to be 4 or 5 bills that will get out of this. The House bills and the Senate bills, and I mentioned one. There is going to be the House Bill 4123. It's homeless issues, coordination of services. I was pleased to hear that bill is a priority, because it's talking about just what we talk about here, trying to get some integrated services to respond. So hopefully that bill will give us some direction. And then mention 4137, that's the temporary shelters. We heard that tonight. And then there's a couple more. that are highlighted by the League of Oregon cities that they're going to watch close and try to lobby for. And Greg, you're in correspondence with them about lobbying.
And we've thrown our support behind, I don't know the numbers, but about the marijuana legislation that
Yeah.
allows cities to increase their tax from, was it 3% to 10%?
4061. Yeah.
And support behind, as a broadband coordinating, committee.
Committee, yeah.
Well, those were, so again, it was, those are an hour long, just about long enough to see the highlights and where the league needs support from its members. So, Mayor, I kind of enjoyed it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, it was
That's fine.
worthwhile to see.
Thank you.
And then one more couple updates before I'm going to have M turn off the YouTube piece because I don't know how. So we have then on the 24th, Tracy from Mountain Community College doing our second DEI work. In the email I said, let's do VTI. So I'll email you a menu. They don't have like an online, they as a restaurant have an online menu, but other websites have the menu. So we'll send that out next week. We'll get your orders in. So we'll have a VTI at the DEI session. And just really quick, wanted to confirm a council replacement process for Councilor Loy, who, did resign. We're proposing to advertise the next newsletter that the application period will be open until, I believe it was April 1st. That gives enough time for the newsletter to go out. People interested that can go, put in their application. It would then be in your April 14th council packet that then you would, the first part of the meeting would be interviews and then an appointment of a person. And we're proposing that it'd be effective April 16th. And that is so they do not have to file a statement of economic interest for being on council for one day. Because if you hold office on April 15th, you're required to file. So they would be in office from April 16th through December 31st. They'd also then be eligible if they wanted to run for that open seat at the November election. So that's what we're proposing, but we didn't get a chance to talk with you all at the last council meeting about how you wanted to go through that process. And I know some of you have kind of talked with some folks, and in the weekly update, I did get back some interest from people kind of like, oh, I may be interested in applying. Let me know when the application is open.
Good. I have another person that I'm trying to get a hold of too that may be interested. I don't know.